But for this painting, this is what I chose to start with. I was looking at some greens that I needed for the tree light and shadow, and also for the reflection in the water light and shadow. I also needed a couple of values for my stone walls. So I've got kind of a yellowy orange and a bluish gray. And then I also wanted a blue for sky and for some reflected skylight on the water. So this is very limited, but this is what I worked with. And this is the collection of pastels I ended up with at the end of the painting session. There's not much order to it. It's just kind of randomly tossed in this little bin. But you can sort of get an idea of the range of value and color.
So welcome everyone. Welcome to Mastrius, and this is Meet the Mentor. We're welcoming Michael Chesley Johnson today, and my name's Olive Dodd. I'm your navigator for today's session. If you're new to Mastrius, it's an online platform that connects mentors with artists, and it's a space for collaboration, mentorship, and community. It fosters an environment where creativity thrives by turning artists into masters, one skill at a time. So you connect with experienced master artists like Michael for a personalized teaching, feedback, support, and it's all in a non-competitive, goal-focused community. So today we're introducing Michael, who's a new mentor at Mastrius. His group starts on March the 10th and runs every second Sunday of the month from 12 p.m. Mountain Time to 2 p.m. And we'll talk more about the mentorship at the end of the demonstration. So again, I'm your navigator, Olive, for today, and I'm just here to ensure a smooth session and any technical background things that need to be done. So it's an opportunity for Michael to share a bit about his artistic practice, and he's going to give us a demonstration. And if you miss any part of this or you have to leave early, the recording will be on the Mastrius YouTube channel, which is mastrius.official. And so you can catch up on that. And if you're new, stick around at the end and I'll show you a little bit more about how the website works, how the mentorship programs go, and how you can register. So if you're happy to keep your camera on, we'd love to see you participate in the live discussions. If you have any questions, just raise your virtual hand or type a question in the chat box, or simply unmute yourself and speak up. We want this to be as interactive and as enjoyable for everyone as possible. So just a little introduction for Michael. I'm just going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second here, do a little technology.
How do I get to see myself?
Oh, up at the top right-hand corner of your screen where it says view, if you click on that, you have an option between speaker and gallery. So if you want to see everybody, just click on gallery. And if you want to just see the speaker, click on speaker. Do you see that?
How can I see myself?
By showing the gallery. Then do you see just one person, or there's about...
I see you, I see Michael, I see Dory on a black screen, I see Drew, Malcolm.
Okay, well, yeah, you should be in there.
Click on
one of those boxes.
Click on the round circle that has an arrow pointing to the right, John.
Where?
At the top right, there's an arrow in a little blue circle. Click on that.
Who cares? Meeting information, recording, sign in, view, speaker.
Oh,
Self, show shelf.
Yeah, there you go. You might be hiding yourself. So show
Oh,
self.
I'm
There you
hiding
go.
myself. Thank
There
you.
you go. Okay, perfect. Okay, just hang on
Oh.
1 second. I'm going to share
Sorry
my
for the
screen.
interruption.
That's okay.
Whoop, what happened?
Oh, share screen and oh, there we go. Can you see the pictures?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So these are Michael's pictures. So I just want to introduce you to our incredible mentor, Michael Chesley Johnson. And this is his vivid world where every brushstroke invites you into the stunning landscapes of the American Southwest, coastal Maine, and the Canadian Maritimes. Michael paints in oil, pastel, and gouache, and his works are a testament to his expertise, particularly in plein air painting. He's mastered plein air painting in nature's most awe-inspiring settings. He's a master pastelist and a member of elite art societies, and his talent is recognized and celebrated in art circles, many art circles. His insights on plein air painting have been published in many books he's written to himself and top art magazines, making him a sought-after mentor for artists at all levels. He has studios in New Brunswick and New Mexico. His passion for teaching and creating art thrives throughout the year. His pieces are rich in technique and emotion, and he's earned places in prestigious collections, touching the hearts of art enthusiasts everywhere. There we go. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Michael to introduce yourself and tell us what you have for us today and share a little bit of your art journey.
Well, thanks for that great introduction. That was above and beyond the call of duty, and I'm humbled. And hello, everybody. Oh, hi, Doug. I see you down there.
Hey, Michael.
Hi. Well, a couple of things. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and what I've done and what I do and why I do it. And then toward the end of the program, I'll share a demonstration with you. And I decided to pre-record the demonstration, and that was because that was the best way I could find to give you a full demonstration in 30 minutes. I'm a quick painter, but even 30 minutes is kind of fast for me. So happy to share that with you toward the end. But as Olive mentioned, you know, I not only do art, but I also write and I teach workshops. I've been a writer for many years for art magazines. Started with Pastel Journal back in, gosh, issue number 4 or something like that back in 2000 or 2001, and have since started playing with some of the more recent magazines like Plein Air Magazine, Watercolor Artists, The Artist Magazine, and then several books along the way. My most recent book came out 2 years ago. It's called Beautiful Landscape Painting Outdoors, semicolon or colon, Mastering Plein Air. And it's suitable for pretty much all levels of artists from beginners on up to more advanced painters. So there's a lot to learn from that. A lot of people ask how I got started in painting. Well, I started painting a long time ago, back when I was a child. I lived in New Jersey back in the late 50s. And there was a fellow on black and white TV called John Nagy, or John Nudge, a Hungarian, who used to run a program called Learn to Draw. And I watched that religiously. And my parents got me the little set with the charcoal sticks and the erasers and all of that. And I followed along on the TV program. And somewhere along the line, I started painting with oil paints. That was probably in high school, I guess. And even though I didn't go to college for that, I went to college originally as a biochem major, quickly realized in my first year that that was a huge mistake, became an English literature major. I continued to paint through all of that. Yeah, I disappointed my parents, I think, by switching from the sciences to English lit.
Yeah,
But
that's a big switch.
it was a big switch, but it was a smart move, I think. I don't think I would have been content with today's world of doing that deep science. So anyway, I continued painting throughout, and eventually started doing some freelance graphic design. Um, got into pastels back in 2000, actually after a hiatus in art. I After college, I got my master's degree and also in English literature. Went right down the graduation ramp to what all liberal artists, art majors do, which is to work in restaurants for a while. And the personal computer came out, and a friend said, "Why don't you come up and work with me at this computer store?" So I said, "Sure." I was burning out on the restaurant business. And that was a good 20 plus years of work. I loved that. And it just suited that half of my brain. But I was still doing art on the side, graphic design and freelance menu design and newspaper advertising and so on. But in 1999, my wife and I decided we'd quit our jobs and follow some dreams. So at the time, we lived in Vermont, and we decided we would go out west. So we landed a job as caretakers on a small gentleman's farm in New Mexico. And during that time, I had the opportunity to take a one-day pastel workshop through our local art group, and that just opened my eyes again. That just reignited the fire for making art. Um, and that's where I am today, 25 almost years later, doing that. And during that time, I also went back to my love of writing. So I started writing for the magazines. Pastel Journal was the obvious first one, and that kind of segued into some of the other art magazines and journals. And over time, I started teaching workshops. I enjoyed sharing what I learned, and I often stay just a little ahead of the students, reading the next chapter, as they say, to stay ahead of them. But a lot of it boils down just to practice. Over the years, I found that really, you can read all the magazines and books, you can watch all the videos, you can do all of that, but ultimately it comes down to doing the actual practice of painting. And whether it's once a day or once a week or once a month, you have to be consistent in it. I also found it useful to try a variety of different things. So I've gone from pastel back to oil, acrylic, watercolor, gouache, hitting all the major mediums. And
Okay.
today I've settled on pastel and oil and gouache.
All set up on delay and everything.
So Michael, how much time do you spend on
Okay,
each
I'm gonna
one?
go
Do you
get
have
my,
a favorite of?
Go get my,
Somebody needs to mute themselves so
Oh,
I
it's
can hear
muted.
the question.
So how much time do you spend on oils or pastel or gouache? Do you have a preference between those?
I like all three. Really, I enjoy them all, and it really depends on the situation. Gouache I got into most recently because of the pandemic. I wanted a daily practice that would be just very portable and freeing of the mind. So I constructed this little gouache kit, and actually Doug down there, Doug's iPad 2, turned me on to gouache. And that just became a daily thing. I'd hike out into the canyon behind our house and spend an hour doing some small sketching. So I've been doing that pretty steadily now for 3 years or so. Before that, it was mostly oil and pastel. I worked exclusively in pastel for maybe 10 years before getting back into oil. And it became more of what do I feel like today? Do I feel like oil or pastel? And I found that pastel could be maybe a little more cumbersome out in the field because I wanted to always take more colors than I thought I could carry, but I ended up limiting that down to a manageable amount. So that became more comfortable. And oil, same thing. I limited myself to maybe 6 or 7 colors, and that became very easy to work with. And you notice I'm talking about going outside to paint. That's what I have done primarily for the last quarter of a century, is outdoor painting. I have moved more into the studio in the last few years. As we get older, we get a little creakier and things seem to get heavier, and just going out is a little more cumbersome. So the studio seems to be a good place to kind of retreat to. But I really have focused on outdoor painting, and that's because I like being outdoors. There's something about being out in the wild just kind of creates an energy that is hard to duplicate for me anyway, in the studio. Um, so a lot of what I've done is based on that. And I find that the outdoor practice really informs what I do in the studio. I find that when I'm outdoors, I'm more or less responding to what I see. Whereas when I come back to this studio, I have an opportunity to reflect on the things that I responded to outside.
I have a question. Do you use
Mm-hmm.
the outdoor paints you create as a stepping stone to do better studio work?
Yes. All the studio work I do is based on what I've done outdoors. So it's going to be a combination of photography and references, color references that I've done either in paint, either in oil or pastel or gouache, as well as memory. So that all comes back inside. And the studio, I have more time, more space to take care of those things that I can't take care of outdoors. So, for example, with the sun moving and shadows shifting, I've got maybe 60 to 90 minutes to capture a certain feeling to the day outside. In the studio, though, I can take as much long as I want to recreate that moment.
Do you
So
take pictures as you go too, or just rely on your sketches?
I try to remember to take pictures, but sometimes the camera stays at home or the phone doesn't get out of the pocket, or I'm just too much into the moment to remember to take a picture. But I always advise students who take plein air workshops with me to take a picture at the beginning of the session. So you have a picture of the scene as it was when you started, that original inspiration, and then try to take one at the end of the session so you know what it was like at the end. So you have kind of a section of time that's bookended. So somewhere in that time, you can pin down that exact feeling that you're trying to recreate.
Okay, and do you keep the colors consistent with the limited colors you take in the field?
I've gotten less picky about color, reproducing the exact color that I see. Back when I first started painting outdoors, I was being very literal or very photographic with the scenes, and I would try to reproduce the color as I saw it, which is a good exercise. And I recommend even experienced painters do that once in a while just to fine tune the observational powers. Um, but after a while, it got to be more about well, how warm is the light and how cool is the shadow, or how cool is the light and how warm is the shadow, and can I recreate that with color in some way without being too literal with what I see in front of me.
Okay, and what camera do you use?
I use my phone.
Oh, handy.
I used to carry a 35 millimeter SLR
Yes.
thing, but I figured, well, it's kind of heavy. It's just one more thing to carry in the field. So let's go with one of those little Canon PowerShot point and shoot cameras, which are much smaller. And then I got lazy with that. I said, well, I have to carry a phone in the field anyway, because, if a mountain lion attacks me or something, or if I fall off a cliff, I might want to call for help. So I've been taking the smartphone, and that, really the photos are adequate these days with that. Um, I think all cameras, unless you are really into the technology, distort color, value, and perspective. They're really only good for detail and as a memory jog. So the smartphone is, perfectly adequate for what I do.
Okay, and so how do you compensate for the lack of color in the shadows of photos?
Well, experience has taught me a lot about how light works in a landscape. So if the photo doesn't show it, I can probably guess kind of what's happening. If you have a warm sunlight effect, typically the shadows are going to be cooler. So it's going to be a combination of a cooler version of that local color of whatever the object is. Plus, if you have a bright blue sky, some of that blue skylight is going to be spilling down into the shadows and affecting that color a bit.
Right. Okay. Beautiful.
And let's see, a couple of other things that you might find interesting is I do split my year between the US and Canada. And many people ask, why is that? Well, we lived in Vermont for 20 plus years, and we used to go hiking and vacationing on the coast of Maine and loved it. And one day we decided, well, wouldn't it be nice to own property on the coast? Well, I can't afford Maine coastal property, too expensive. So we went up the coast to Canada, New Brunswick, and it was a little less expensive. And on Campobello Island, which is where we ultimately settled, it was even less expensive. Um, but what we liked about Campobello Island, which is in New Brunswick, Canada, uh, the scenery is just fantastic. It's a combination of a lot of the kinds of things you can see along the coast in a very concentrated area. If you're not familiar with Campobello Island, it was the summer home for President Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, U.S. president, for many years as a child and later as an adult. And Eleanor Roosevelt lived there for a lot longer after FDR died. So 3,000 acres of this island are park. It's either the Roosevelt Campobello International Park or the Herring Cove Provincial Park. So about a third of its parkland. And it's just gorgeous. We loved it there. Love it there. So coming out to the west, though, it's a lot like being near the ocean. We like the open spaces that you get by the ocean side. And you get that similar effect out here in the Southwest. It may not be desert, but you have long views with mesas. So you get the same idea of lots of space. So between the two, it's been a very comfortable living going back and forth. Different terrain too. So I've got, ocean cliffs on one side and I've got mesa cliffs on the other side.
Beautiful. And so that's obviously a source of a lot of your paintings, as we saw.
It is.
Lots of
Yeah.
cliffs. Wonderful.
I like to travel to paint too. So I found that between those two locations, if I do a bit of traveling, I can see some other interesting scenery. So I've taught workshops in Indiana and I've enjoyed the Indiana dunes along the lake there. And I've taught workshops in, one place or another. And I try to focus on scenic spots. And if I'm doing painting retreats, which is something else I've started doing lately, in addition to the workshops, painting retreats are where we take some experienced painters, go to a scenic location and spend some time together. I found those can be very, very inspiring too, to find some nice scenic spots. One spot we went to not too long ago was Brown County in Indiana. Doug helped spearhead that retreat. That was just a beautiful area with a lot of art history behind it. So
Beautiful. And so then we're starting up a Mastrius group. And so, but mentorship is a little bit different from a workshop, much
it is
different, or from a retreat. So would you like to comment on kind of what you see as your vision for
Sure.
the mentorship?
Yeah. Yeah. For the workshops that I teach, it's more about teaching you a skill, showing you how to see outdoors and how to put that into paint or pastel or what have you. The retreats are more about exploring an area and getting comfortable with that and also building some camaraderie. The mentoring is going to be a little different from either one of those. This will be a group situation, and we will be trying to build a sense of community among us and learning from each other. But as the leader of the group, my goal is to work with each of you individually, each person individually, find out what your goals are, help you fine tune the goals. Sometimes the goal you think you want isn't the goal you really should be working on. So help you with that. And the idea is we do critiques of your work, steer you along the way, leads you to some sort of goal that can help you become a better painter. And as a group, that would work out because we all kind of work on each other and help us meet those goals. And it's going to be a very supportive group. As some of you have taken workshops with me before, I'm not a hard teacher. I'm pretty easy. So
Yeah, typically how the groups go is there's a 2-hour session with the artist, with the mentor. And so then you go over different homework or whatever questions you have. And then there's homework that you have a month to do. Then we meet mid-month with just the group, either with or without the mentor, just to discuss about how things are going, or just to check in with everyone, make sure everything's going fine. And then we meet again the next month and go over whatever is on your mind or critiquing the work that you've done. So yeah, it works out very well.
yeah, I'm looking forward to doing it. It's I've done private mentoring one-on-one, and as much as that I've enjoyed doing that, I have really felt that the person I'm mentoring would benefit from being in a group situation. not a huge group, a small group, 8, 9, 10, something on that order, or even less. I just find it to be much more helpful. And because each painter is different, each artist is different in some way, I think that the critiques I give an individual and the goals I help a person set will help the other people in the group also identify goals and areas that they need to work on. I think it will be a situation where, the sum is greater than the parts in some ways.
Well, yeah, you always learn from each other in a group. There's always something you didn't know kind of thing. And the groups have a maximum of 8 people, so it's a very close knit group. So I'm in another group and I absolutely love it. My art has already been starting to show the signs of some good techniques.
Cost.
So we have one more question, and then I'm wondering if, oh, Drew, go ahead.
If it's okay. Michael, I follow your Substack, and I know you've talked about this a little bit, but your paintings have such vibrancy, and the foregrounds and the landscapes really pop off the background. And I'm wondering if you have some sort of hack for getting that saturation to be so vibrant, but without feeling overbearing and without feeling oversaturated. Because
Yeah.
when I'm doing a painting, I will throw in too much saturation everywhere and I lose the focal point. So
Mhm.
I'm wondering if there is some sort of technique you keep in the back of your head for making sure that foreground feels really strong and vital without giving you that kind of I want to puke sensation. That makes sense.
Yeah. I think what it has to do with is in the early stages of the painting, I'm not focused too much on color, on unifying the colors so that it all works well together. More interested in how warm or how cool something is, and not so much in the saturation of it. So then things tend to get a little wild in the early stages sometimes. But then I stop and I step back and I try to evaluate what I've done. And then I know I can tone down those other areas in the background, for example, that don't need that kind of saturation, and kind of push the viewer's focus more toward where I want it to go. So, and I prefer doing that rather than being too literal right up the front with the color. I find that if I'm a little wilder with it, maybe at the beginning, with the understanding that I can tone that down later, that's what I do. In fact, in the demonstration I'm going to show you, I kind of have that approach where I'm making my best guess at the color scheme and then adjusting that in later steps.
Yeah. If I can do one follow-up real quick.
Sure.
When you're doing a more desaturated tone in the background, are you doing the thing where you are mixing desaturated complements together? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not necessarily. I might not be looking at complements. I might be looking at actually using grays or even near complements. I found that near complements tend to give you a better color harmony than the actual direct complement. They're a little easier in the eyes if you go with the near complement. So for those of you who aren't familiar with that, if you have red, the complement of red is going to be a green, but there are different kinds of reds and there are different kinds of greens. So if you have an orangish red, which would be a warmer red, you might pick a green that's actually more toward not the blue green, which would be the direct opposite, but maybe more of a warmer green with that. So things are a little closer together on the color wheel. And I find that works better for creating grays and for toning things down, and also for just keeping the color harmony so it's not so nuts.
Thank you.
Does that help?
That's great. Yeah.
So maybe that's a good segue into moving into your demo.
Sure.
Oh.
The demo's in pastel. I do everything,
nice.
but I thought pastel would be nice. It's a little quicker for me, and the total painting time is probably about an hour, but the demo is about 30 minutes. And I wanted to share with you first a couple of images that I'll be using in it. So I'm going to share my screen.
Enjoying the video? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when new Mastrius videos are added.
Can you all see that?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. This is the reference photo I'll be using. This is in Scotland. I'm doing a series of Scotland paintings right now based on 2 previous trips. I'm about to go again this September. The idea to create a book eventually and a whole bunch of Scottish paintings. And this is in Orkney, which is at the top end of Scotland. And what I liked about the scene, what drew me to it, was not just the big, beautiful tree shape in the center, but also the shadows on the stone walls and on some of the buildings. So this will be the reference photo I used. And in the demo, you can see you'll see the photo in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And to start with, I took a 12 by 18 sheet of sanded pastel paper. For those of you who don't do pastel, sanded papers are great because they can hold lots of layers of pastel and can give you a real gorgeous saturation of color. And I gridded it off 4 by 4 like that. And you'll see that the photo is gridded off the same way if I have a photo shot somewhere. You'll note that I marked off the right side of the paper with a piece of artist tape. The idea is I would have a little bit of paper that I could test my colors on. I think during the demo, I didn't do that. I did my tests directly on the painting surface. And here I've taken the photo that you saw and have transferred the design. In the studio, I can often spend a lot of time with design. I don't do that so much out in the field. But in this situation, I liked the composition that I had, so I just went right with what I had in the photograph. Okay, there you see the reference photo at the bottom with the grid on it. There's some apps you can buy that will put grids on images for you. The other option is you do this the old-fashioned way and print it out and then take your ruler and a magic marker and draw your grid. This is the selection of pastels I have to choose from. There's a lot of color here. I like to keep the pastels organized by value, color family, saturation, temperature, cool or warm versions. If I'm painting in oil, I'm probably going to have just 6 tubes of paint. It's a lot more manageable in some ways than all this color. The problem with pastels is the temptation is to grab whatever color you think you need, and you might end up with like 30 colors to start with, which is not a good way to begin a pastel painting.
And so how many do you take into the field when you go?
Well, good question. I have a box that has about maybe half this amount in it. The idea is you have 6 color families: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. So that's 6 colors, and you need to have a cool and a warm version of each one. So that's 2 times 6, which is 12. And you want to have, say, 5 steps in value. So that's 60. And then you need to have hard and soft versions. So that's 120. And then it just keeps magnifying. And you might want to throw some neutrals in too at some point. However, I've created what I've trademarked my extreme limited pastel palette, and it consists of 12 sticks.
That's a
Wow.
Yeah,
that's good.
and if you're smart about what 12 sticks you pick out, you can do quite a lot of work with that. And if you go to my blog or Substack, you can search on the extreme limited pastel palette, I think, and come up with the exact choices I use. But for this painting, this is what I chose to start with. I was looking at some greens that I needed for the tree, light and shadow, and also for the reflection in the water, light and shadow. I also needed a couple of values for my stone walls. So I've got kind of a yellowy orange and a bluish gray. And then I also wanted a blue for sky and for some reflected skylight on the water. So this is very limited, but this is what I worked with.
And do you have a favorite make of pastels that you use, hard or soft?
I think most pastel painters just have a lot of different brands. What I use, you can't have enough pastels, right? Right, Fran? So the idea is that, you want a foundation set. So for example, for the hard pastels, which you kind of want to have a full set of, I usually pick either New Pastel or Prismacolor or Cretacolor. Rembrandts, they're a little softer, but they make a great foundation set. Then I'm looking at soft pastels. And I go anywhere from Unison to Blue Earth to Terry Ludwig, and some of the other softer brands, and I mix and match. The problem with pastels is, once you get down that little nub of that favorite color you like so much, how do you know what pastel stick to get when you need to order another one? So theoretically, you keep labels, or you keep the numbers, or you create a color chart so you can go back to that stick and order what you want. But I've gotten past that. I just go through my collection of thousands of pastels and try to find something similar. So that kind of works for me. It beats ordering another full set of the pastels, because you can't remember exactly what pastel stick that was that you needed. With oil paint, I just ordered another tube of red. And this is the collection of pastels I ended up with at the end of the painting session. There's not much order to it. It's just kind of randomly tossed in this little bin. But you can sort of get an idea of the range of value and color. One thing I do with pastels is I always have a little box like this that I can put the pastels I'm using at the moment in. Instead of putting them back in my big assortment of pastels and having to search for it, I have one here. I can just pick out the little green I used before.
Nope, hang on.
So, and this is the finished painting. So you'll see me go through the steps to get to this, and you can see, well, you can see the value difference. If you squint a bit, you can see that there's a lot of light in the tree, a lot of light on the stone walls. And as far as the shadowy values go, you can see those as simple masses. I try to keep thinking of things as simple masses. So anyway, let's go into the video. I'm going to stop sharing. Any questions on this so far?
John's asking, can you mix pastels on a board as painting to get different colors to blend as one in oil painting? So I'm not sure if I'm reading that correctly.
Yeah, I think the idea is, can you mix pastels to create color? And you can, but the idea is that it's easy to make mud more so than it is in oil paint when you mix colors. And you've got all these beautiful colors that are made by the manufacturers. And if you want a particular shade of blue-green, you're probably off getting it rather than trying to mix your own, because you won't be able to get that same intensity, I think. So now let's go to the video. Can everybody see? No, you can't see that yet because I haven't shared it. Share. There we go. Can you all see that?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. So this, go ahead. So here's the paper, which I've taped to a board, and you can see the design again, and you can see the photo at the bottom left. So I'm going to hit the play button, and if you can't hear, the volume isn't high enough, I can fix that.
I don't hear anything, Michael. Did you click those two boxes?
I did not.
Ah.
So we're going to, I'm usually pretty good with technology, but it's past my bedtime.
Well, it's a little tricky, those two little boxes. That they're not very obvious.
Thanks for reminding me. Okay. Let's try that again.
Got my drawing laid out. I've
About
got
that?
the reference photo over here. And what I'm going to do now is break up the masses into fairly simple shapes and think about what my lightest and darkest notes are. So first I'm going to start with the darks using, going with trees.
So John's asking about your finger coverings. Is that a set of gloves?
The big light shapes here.
Yes, those are instead of gloves. I'm using finger cuts. Gloves make my hands sweat too much. So these finger cuts are, well, they prevent that. And you can buy these at pharmacies or also online. And they come in different sizes, and they keep the fingernails clean and avoids cracking of skin and nails.
like this. I'm just making my best guess at what these colors are or were. If I were doing this in the field, I'd be doing exactly the same thing, just kind of looking at the shapes, making my best guess at what these all are. So let's go on with the darks. This is a sort of a gray down green pastel. I usually start off with hard pastels, but once in a while I just pick whatever pastel seems to have the closest color. Not worrying so much about the exact softness or hardness, but just looking at the color value that I want. And just to define that a little better, let's go in with the what I think is the light value. This is a very soft pastel. And you know, my first feeling is it's probably too light.
Yep.
It's going to be as light as the sky most likely, but this is my best guess, so we're just going to go with it. Now I'm going to continue going into some of these areas. Now my first guess is that this is probably too dark of a pastel for the shadows of this wall. And we'll probably have to fix that later.
And Michael, what size of
That's
paper are
okay,
you
'cause
working
it's
on?
my best guess, and I know that I can go back in and
I'm working on 12 by
make
16.
adjustments for my next layer.
It's cut a little larger, so it's actually a piece of 12 by 18. So I have a couple of inches on the right side that I can make test marks on if I need to.
Okay.
This is like a medium soft pastel.
And what type of paper is it? Is that UART or
It's UART. It's the 400 grit.
Let's see, where else does that color need to go?
So sanded papers
That's
are,
about it.
like I said, they're a lot more
And let's
aggressive
go
with the
on with what I think
pastels. So
is the
typically you start off with the
Color,
harder pastels so that it doesn't
the
chew up
stone wall
all
and
your
the sunlight.
expensive
And this,
softer
again,
pastels.
seems way too garish. It's also a very loud pastel.
Sorry for the noise.
Now let's move on into the water. There's sort of a reddish note down here that I want to make sure I take care of. The coloring values seem about right. Oh yeah, and this little building here has kind of a red note to it as well. And let's put some in this window when I'm thinking about it. It's a good dark value for that. And now let's move into some of the green that's going to be down here. And again, this seems
Michael, I have a question
probably too
here.
light.
If you use, I'm not sure if I understand the question. It might be a spelling mistake. If you used a garish pastel, how do you compensate without getting mud?
And
Well, if I use a garish pastel when it's maybe too colorful, too saturated, what I'll do later is take a near complement, as I talked about earlier, or a gray, and that helps me desaturate it. So, for example, these bright yellows, I might work in a pale, somewhat violet color to kind of tone them down a bit.
too dark for sky color, but again, we can adjust this so I don't get too hung up on stuff. Back here, it's a bunch of buildings and roofs. I haven't really identified any specific color for this area. And this blue is a nice cool note that I think is going to be pretty nice for that. So let's go ahead and put that in as well for whatever these structures are back here. And let's go ahead and put in a little bit of this, what might be a mountain out there, change the color of that just a little bit. Okay. Okay, now that I've got this stage done, everything's basically covered, except for the little area down here. Let's go ahead and just put in some greenery. What I want to do now is look at all my big shapes, like this one, and I want to compare it with what I see out in the landscape, or in this case, in the photograph. And I can tell right off that this shape is too light and probably a little too warm. So what I want to do is darken that a bit and cool it down a bit. And if I look at the adjacent shape, this one appears to be way too light, but I'm not going to adjust that until I adjust this large shape first. This will probably make this seem even lighter, so I'm going to have to probably darken it, but I don't want to do that until I start adjusting all of these. So let's see.
So just quickly to interrupt here, what I'm doing is I've gone from the best guess stage, where I just very quickly made some color choices just to start blocking things in. And now I want to start adjusting those. And what this does is it frees you up in that first stage. It removes a lot of frustration and agony trying to get those exact color choices. Because you know that in the next phase, you can adjust all that. It's very easy.
I've got this blue that I use down here, and maybe that would be enough to darken that a bit. No, it doesn't. So let's go through the box over here and find one that's a bit darker. There we go. I try to reuse the pastels I have as much as possible. Without picking out new ones. Yeah, this is reading a good bit better.
And Michael, do you ever use alcohol or water
So the next thing I want to look at
as
is
a base?
that looks too light.
John says he took a workshop where they used alcohol to spread the color out and fill the tooth of the paper.
Yes, sometimes I do that. You can either use water, or you can use alcohol, rubbing alcohol or denatured alcohol, or you can use mineral spirits. Typically, if I'm working on a sheet of white paper like this, I might do that. But the pastels were soft enough here that I was able to cover a lot of the white without causing problems. Also, if it's a bright sunny day that you're painting, those little white spots, if they poke through a bit, they can add a real sense of sunlight to the scene.
It feels more natural now. And down here, I want to take the same green, because this feels like it's just way too light. Drag some of that over there as well. Just that. Step back, take a look, and see what it looks like. Okay, I'm still thinking that some of the dark areas here could be a bit darker, but I like the color adjustment and the values getting closer, so let's move on to some of the rest of the painting. This area definitely needs to be maybe a bit orangier, and also maybe just a little bit darker in value. So I'll take an orange pastel, which seems too light. Seems about the same lightness. So I'll get a slightly darker one. It's better. Maybe it's still too light, but at least I like the color better. And I'm going to work some of that orange color to the shadow area, because this is too blue. It needs to be warmed up a bit. And I'm feeling that there's a good bit of reflected light in this area. Now that's reading is too rich. I'm probably going to want to gray it down a little bit. Do it over here as well. And that gives me some good reflected light into those cool areas. Okay, now let's look at some of this area here. Some of this could be darker. I need to redefine the some of the drawing here. So I'm going to take out my little bit of wine charcoal and just kind of restate some of this. this kind of got lost, this building back here, so I want to make sure I fix that. Let's see, this wall here. Actually, a little doorway here we need to take into account. I think it was behind that wall. We're not quite sure what's happening, but we'll figure it out. It's okay to go back and redo your drawing once in a while. The reason being that as you paint into it, you find that you start losing some of the drawing. So you want to go back and restate that periodically. Okay, one thing I'm seeing right off is that this shadowed area needs to continue down here. Somehow I missed that. So let's go down here with that and just drag it right down into the water. I'll go back and restate this reflected area. Over here, some of the same. And let's calm this down a bit. It's a little too hot red. Something like that kind of brings it together a bit more. Now I want to
And
go back
Michael,
in here.
a question here for you. Did you work on the perspective of the buildings in your initial drawing, or did you just eyeball it? I know you did use a grid, so.
Yeah, really the grid was more or less for just establishing where the big shapes would sit on in the painting. I just eyeballed the perspective, and actually when I finished the demonstration, I realized the perspective was off on a few things. So I went back in secretly without anyone knowing it and fixed the perspective. Also, as we get close to that hour mark, Olive, if you want me to zip ahead a little bit in the demo, I can do that. Just let me know.
Sure, yeah, go ahead, wherever you feel a good point might be. Yeah, just skip ahead a little bit unless anyone has any questions.
Let's put that dark wedge back in there.
I will skip the section where I perform magic.
It's looking pretty.
And where all the secrets are mentioned.
Oh, no.
Still not totally happy with this little bit here, so to take this darker pastel, which is still not dark enough, and go find one that's a bit darker. Maybe that piece. Yeah, it's a little darker.
Yeah, really the whole process is just adjusting from that initial state. You know, you work on one big shape, see how it compares to the shape next to it. Once you're satisfied with that, you move on to the next shape that's adjacent to that shape. And eventually the whole thing starts to come together, and you start working on these little minor tweaks to make it work.
The painting.
What about in a big landscape where, do you ever work from the sky, the very far distant landscape and work your way forward?
Sometimes I find that a lot of the paintings that I start with, I will work on the dark areas first, which tend to be the closer ones in the foreground. But sometimes it's worthwhile establishing the sky first, because that sets a key for the whole painting. It's easy to go too dark too soon in a landscape painting. So if you start with the sky, sometimes that'll give you a better result.
Brown pastel I used in here, so we're going to want to definitely make that a bit darker at some point.
So what I'm going to do is just jump ahead a little bit,
just to kind of start.
Now look at that, I can make it very fast. Zip, 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 zip. You can get an idea for what's happening. I'm putting little sky holes in now. Let's see what this does.
A bit of sunlight. So I'm going to introduce just a little bit of a light note where that happens. Doesn't have to be much. Something like that might be enough to get started.
I'm using a hard pastel here to create edges. So the hard pastel, you can use the edge of it, create fine marks like
let's
that.
Warm up some of these rooftops now with a little pink color, perhaps. Just enough to give it some warmth, so it doesn't look like it's some piece of sky that's somehow landed on the roof. Okay. Let's also add a little bit of that here because it's not quite as orange as we're given to think. And we probably should add some of that to this building, or the wall rather. I wouldn't mind getting a softer version of that. So here's a softer version. Yeah. And a little bit of that happens here. And a little bit of that happens here. Right here, let's go ahead with a sharper note of that. Okay. And what happens if I drag a little bit of this throughout here? It just tones down that color ever so much. It's not quite so orangey. Go back here with this darker pastel, just to break that up a bit more. So it's not quite so vivid. Just fix the perspective there. Let's go back over here and add a bit of this blue back into that wall. It's a little too much. And this edge here needs to be a little sharper and less fuzzy. Okay. Down here, sort of smooth this up a little bit. Get rid of these little white spots.
That's where toning the paper with a wash would have helped initially. But I like the white spots showing through elsewhere for sunlight glints of sunlight.
And over here, same idea.
A question for you. Do you ever get lost in painting and then get frustrated prior to finish? I mean, before you make it all come together in a believable rendering.
That's a tough question. It's more of a question of abandoning the painting. I think if I get to that point, I'm going to put it aside for a while, or I'm going to wipe it out and start over.
Of yellow.
But it doesn't happen very often. Usually if I'm into a painting, it comes together somehow.
I think that texturally it's going to be important to do that. Especially right here where center of interest is, more or less.
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit more here.
You can go back and forth almost forever trying to resolve little issues with lighting. In some way you have to decide when enough is enough. And I think we're getting pretty close. Wouldn't mind putting a little more of a lime green in here, just not quite light enough, dark enough. This one might be better. Yeah. Because there's going to be a certain amount of this seaweed stuff on this rack and also down here on this lower part of the wall. And that really punches it up against those reds. Where else can we use this? Our tree? No, maybe not. How about here on this wall? A little wedge of light that comes out. It's kind of nice, but maybe orange would be a better color note. There we go. Helps make this little bit of light here more understandable. It's also going to be a little bit of this green on the roofs, I think, because it's a maritime area. So we might have a richer note of blue down here. Let's see if we've got a good purpley blue. Yeah.
And would the flag in the reference photo have commanded too much attention? Is that why you left it out?
I forgot about the flag. And, ultimately,
Yeah,
I guess
Rusty,
because I
put
forgot
that
about it, it wasn't
maybe,
that important.
Top of the trees. Maybe it's sort of fading in the sky, getting a little bit of that bounce light.
And really, it's about the light on
Sky.
the stone wall and on the buildings. I think that the
Yeah, I think
flag
we're
might have
pretty
detracted
close.
too much from it.
Yeah.
And that was the video. Let me stop sharing.
Wonderful.
And there we are.
Yeah, and so if anybody would like to see the reference photo and the final picture, I've put a link in the chat where you can see those pictures online.
And I can show you all that real quickly if you like again. Would that be a good idea?
Sure.
Okay. I'm just going to share my screen and go back to that. Here's the final image. And you can see that well, you can see I've made a few changes. I've adjusted the light on this little stone. What do you call that? That's stone, that sloped
A
stone
ramp?
thing. The ramp, that's the word. The ramp going out to the water, so it makes more sense. I also adjusted some of the perspective on the boathouse on the left and also on the wall, and put in some little blue pops of cool color into the tree shadows and also here and there in the water and other shadows. And then I'll show you the reference photo again. Let's see. There's the reference photo. And I also left out the seagull, I noticed now.
Right. Yeah, and I see you simplified the tree quite a bit, which makes
Yes.
it much easier for you.
Yeah, the whole goal is simplifying. That makes it much easier to paint. So if you can simplify the number of shapes in just a few shapes and the values into just a few values and even the colors in just a few colors, if you start with that, you can get a very dramatic statement to start with, and you can always massage it later and make it more subtle if you need to.
Yeah, and so how would you describe your style? Like there's when you're looking at your photos, there's a very unique style to you. And did it take time to develop that, or was that kind of something you've always had?
Well, it was never a conscious thing. It's just the more you paint, the more you develop a style, just because of the way you're holding the paintbrush or holding the pastel or the way you make your marks. So you develop a very individual voice when you're painting. And, as a mentor, that's one of the things that we'd be looking at in the mentoring program is trying to see what kind of a voice or style participants are developing and to maybe point that out, reinforce it, and help them get there faster. So you don't have to paint for maybe 25 years to develop that style.
That would be handy.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
And so what brought you to Mastrius, and what's your teaching style? And so tell us a little bit more about the group. I think you talked about this in the beginning, but let's summarize it again.
now Trina actually, my other half, turned me on to Mastrius, and that was because we have a mutual friend that was teaching and mentoring for the group. So that's how I connected. And looking at it, it just seemed like a really well-developed program. And I was thinking to myself, how much do I have to pay to be a mentor for this thing? So it was that kind of a good situation where it's just amazing that you have all these tools and helpful aids for mentors and for the mentees. As far as my teaching style goes, it's kind of laid back. I let you work with your materials and your technique and your approach, and I show you how I do mine and what I use, and hope that my sharing what I have will influence, if it needs to influence you, to manage some shift or change in a direction that you find useful. So that's how I work. And I've been doing this for 20 plus years, and I've taught lots of people and lots of different places, and it's been a treat, really.
Okay, and so again, the mentorship group starts on March the 10th. So it's every second Sunday of the month, starting at 12 p.m. Mountain Time. So everything, because Mastrius is based in Calgary, everything is based on Mountain Time. So then adjust your time zone to that. And so I've put a link to the Mastrius page, Michael's page on Mastrius in the chat. And if you would like more information about Mastrius and just how to register and what it's about, just stay on after we finish up with Michael, and I'd be happy to show you around Mastrius and talk to you more about that. So, yeah, so anything else you'd like to add about your group or your teaching methods?
Well, I'm looking forward to it. One thing that I've done with the private mentoring in the past, which I plan to continue with this arrangement, is to have folks send me images of their assignments prior to the time we meet. And what I do with those is I drag those through what I call my Photoshop mill. I take them into Photoshop and I adjust them to help improve them, to get them to where I think you're trying to get with it. And then we talk about that step by step, change by change in the meeting. And people found that very helpful to see the actual changes and see how they might be applied.
Beautiful. I love the technology. And there is a library that everybody can upload their work to once we have a group. There is a few folders. There's a chat where we can talk to each other. It's just the members in the group, and a library where only the members in the group see the work. And so everybody can upload their pictures of their artwork there. And okay, so John, I see you've asked about how much it's going to cost. So just stick around afterwards and I'll show you the page and we can talk about that. Okay, so I think that's about it for our time with Michael. I want to thank Michael so much for all your knowledge and sharing your demo.
Thank you.
Yeah. So please reach out to Mastrius. There's a chat on there, and stick around and we can answer a few more particular questions about Mastrius and the mentorship. Yeah, and there's also a 30-day back money guarantee if you join and you decide that it's not for you. So it's I've really enjoyed it. I just love the community. There's events from other mentors every week. So you get to know all the other groups and different mentors and artists, and yeah, just lots of tips of information just flowing around the community. So yeah, all right. And again, if you want to catch the replay on this, if you want to watch it again, just go to YouTube and look for the Mastrius official channel, and it will be there too. And I can put that link in the chat.
I do have a question.
Okay.
Do we, if we participate with Michael, do you provide us with scenes you want painted, or do we choose what we want to paint? how does that work with you?
Well, I guess I could answer that question. With me, what I would do is have you paint from your own reference material. I feel that the best reference material is your own rather than trying to use mine or someone else's, because you remember what the scene was like, you remember what the emotion was you felt at the time. You have a lot of personal attachment to that moment that you won't find necessarily with my photos or someone else's.
Thank you.
I can give you guidance though, what kinds of reference material to use. So that would be helpful, I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay. Well, unless there's any other questions for Michael? Mary, you look like you were putting up your hand. No. Okay, sorry. All right. Well, yeah. So again, stick around and I'll show you a little bit around the Mastrius site and what it's all about if you'd like to do that. Otherwise, we hope to see you in the group on March 10th. So be sure to register. And Michael, thank you so much. It's been a delight learning from you this evening.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure, and everybody was great. Good questions, and I appreciate the attention and your time. And hopefully we'll
Thank you, Michael.
see you in a couple of weeks.
And thank you, Olive.
Oh, you're very welcome. My
Adios.
pleasure.
Thanks, Michael.
Adios.
Thank you.
Adios.
Yes.
I guess that's it.
Yeah. Okay. So who would like to see a little bit more about Mastrius?
I would.
Okay, perfect. All right.
Sure.
Let me just share my screen.
Would you like me to bow out?
It's entirely up to you.
I think it's my bedtime. I couldn't remember the word ramp.
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk to you
Okay.
later.
Well, thanks
What
again.
time do you get up in the morning? If you go to bed this time and,
I'm usually up around 3 or 4.
whoa.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I usually spend a couple hours reading. I read nonfiction at night or in the morning and fiction at night. So right now I'm reading this huge biography of George Washington by Ron Chernow, and it's like 800 pages.
Oh
And
my
so it's-
goodness.
Yeah, so it's keeping me up in the mornings.
Well, that's good.
Alrighty.
Very healthy to early to bed, early to rise.
Exactly.
That's
Thanks
what I
again,
do too.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye, Michael.
Bye.
Okay, let me share my screen and I'll share a little bit more about Mastrius.
You're going to turn the recording off?
No, I can't turn it off, but you can feel free to ask any questions. So this is Mastrius, and this is Michael's page on Mastrius. Let me just go to, so when you go to mastrius.com, tells you about what it's all about. You're here to meet different mentors and really grow. Because the concentration is on your work and not in, like in a workshop, you're doing the same thing for everybody. And here it's working on what you want to work about. And that's what makes the difference. And so when you go here, up at the top, you can start here and it tells you a little bit more about how it works. So it's live and interactive. So it's always a Zoom call. So a maximum of 8 people in your group. And depending on the level of the students and the level of the masters, there's different prices. So if you're a beginner and you want to learn more techniques and things like that, you would maybe consider yourself an aspiring. But if you're pretty honed in on the technique and you're more developing it as a business, maybe it's emerging. And if you're quite established, then accomplished. And there's a questionnaire that you can self-assign yourself a level. Michael's group is aspiring, so it's starting from the beginning. So here's what you get. You get professional mentorship, dedicated guidance, that's me, for any technical problems. There's a home studio where you can just organize all your own paintings and things. It's a 2-hour session. And then another 1-hour session with a group, with or without Michael. It depends on the mentor and what the group prefers. We connect via Zoom, and there's weekly chats and things like that, or weekly events, and all kinds of opportunities to connect with the community. You get discount on online courses. So there's mentorship groups and also online courses. There's also an event recording. So every time there's an event every week, it goes into a library. And so you can have access to that.
For how long?
Oh, as long as you're part of the group, as long as you have a membership. And there's also, if you're not part of a mentors group, you can also pay just to I think it's $7 or $15 a month just to have the event recordings. So then you can choose your mentor, and of course, oops. So here's a quiz to take to figure out what level you're at. So, and there's a bit of a description here if you want to decide what level you're at. And then you can find your mentor here, and you can filter it by a medium or a time of day, a style, a subject matter, or artist stage, all these different things. So if you just only interested in pastel, you can click on pastel and only the pastel mentors will come up. Or you can search by name, and we can type in Michael, and he's here. So it gives you a bit of description of Michael and a link to his website and his Instagram. Some of his paintings.
I don't have that. I have option 2 still showing.
Do you mean what I'm showing you?
Yes. What you're talking about, all I have is option 2. Welcome
Option-
and closing.
Yes, same here.
Option 2.
Oh, we can't see your
The
screen.
first screen that you showed us is still up.
Yes.
Oh, I switched screens on you. Sorry about that. How's that?
Okay.
Oh my goodness, all that time I was talking and you couldn't see it. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry about that.
Do we get a discount based on that?
Absolutely. I switched screens. Oh my goodness. Oh dear. Oh, I see option 2. Oh dear. Oh, oh goodness. Oh my. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, let me just do a quick little repeat then. So,
How much does Michael cost?
okay, let's go to Michael then. Anyway, so this is Michael's on Mastrius. You should have said something earlier. I'm sorry about that. And these are his paintings. And this is what he specializes in. And so he's $87 a month. And
Okay,
it's
my question is, let's say that he has a session and we can't attend the session because we have other commitments, but we want to go back to it the next day or later on that night.
absolutely. There's a recording. There's always a recording. So you can go back to the recording anytime.
Okay, and how does the recording come across?
It's on the Mastrius site. So once you join, then you have a whole section in there just dedicated to your group. And in that group, you'll have a chat so you can talk to the mentor and the other students. There's a library where you can upload your information. And then there's a tab where you can have all your session recordings. So you can always go back. So if you happen to miss a class or anything like that, you can go back and watch the recording. Absolutely. everything.
So we can email in Zoom if we miss it and read his comments about his mentoring.
I'm not sure what you mean about email to Zoom. The class is recorded in Zoom, and you can watch the recording again, and you can also chat and leave messages to each other.
Okay, chatting, yes.
Chatting, yeah. It's a new technology. Yeah. And so, oh my goodness. I wish I messed up. So if you go to the Mastrius site, let me go back here because I messed up. So the top of the Mastrius site, you can check this out. It'll tell you a little bit about Mastrius, and then you would go start here. And then it'll tell you a little bit more about how the mentorship works, and depending on the level, and you can choose your mentor. And then over on the side here, you can identify what stage you're at. So it's whatever stage you feel that you're at. It doesn't really matter. It's self-proclaimed. It's just as a guideline for yourself. And then you can find your mentor. So you can filter on here. So you can go by medium, pastel if you wish, and it would show you all the mentors that do pastel. Or you can also type in the search box here for Michael. And so that would take you to Michael's page. And then if you're ready to do it, all you simply do is add this to your cart. You can change your time zone to be whatever time zone you wish, so you don't have to do the translation yourself. And then add it to your cart, and you will receive an email welcoming you and giving you all the information with a link to the group, and just click that link and create a sign in, and you're ready to go. Okay, so anyway, I hope that gives you something to think about. It starts March 10th, which is 10 days away.
Mhm. Right.
Unbelievable. We're actually starting to get into March now. So hope to
March.
see you there. And
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Olive.
All right. And have a wonderful evening. And
Thanks.
feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Okay.